Hello, Google Partners community. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to today's Mobile Measurement Hangout. My name is Megan Lee and I sit on Google's agency team as Agency Development Manager. And my core job really is to bring the go-to-market strategies with our agency partners, and not surprisingly, mobile has been quite a popular topic for the past few years. Sitting here with me is my colleague Matt. Matt, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Matt. I'm a mobile product specialist. I work on all solutions mobile related, and specifically measurement is a big piece of that.
Absolutely. Welcome to join us today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
With the proliferation of mobile devices, we all know user behavior has changed quite significantly over the past few years. So it's very natural for marketers to start to think of new methods and new ways to measure mobile more accurately. The challenge is measuring mobile really isn't easy, right? Consumers' constant connectivity via mobile has created many new touch points and many new paths to purchase. So for today's session, we're going to use about 25 to 30 minutes to go over some of these history of measurement and some of the new trends we've seen in the space. We're going to talk about two really important measurement solutions, which is cross-device conversion and attribution modeling. Then we're going to touch upon the mobile's upper funnel value, and we'll leave about 10 minutes in the end to address questions. So just a reminder, this is a live Hangout. Feel free to submit questions over the Hangout, and we'll make sure we get to them at the end.
All right, let's dive in.
Let's get started.
Okay, cool. So I always like to start with a game, just to keep it fun, and feel free to guess out there. But let's assume this is a billboard, okay, for the latest Star Wars movie on a busy highway in San Francisco. So do you think this led to greater than or less than 5,000 movie ticket sales?
All right, Matt, knowing you, I feel this might be a tricky question. So now, let me calculate the population of San Francisco. I would probably guess this is over 5,000 tickets
Who knows,
sold.
right? Not even worth making you do the calculation. And I think that's the whole point here. So when we look at how people traditionally measured advertising, if we go back and kind of look at other mediums like the billboard, print, TV, radio, it was always difficult sometimes to measure the exact return on ad spend, right? People invested a lot of money in these platforms, but they had to have good faith that it actually led to bottom of the line conversions.
That's such a great point. I used to work in the TV space. Although we have these measurement tools such as Nielsen ratings, really it's very difficult to pinpoint which ad led to a sale, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then, when we take a look here, which is the reason we're all here today, in 2000, AdWords was born, right? And the whole point is digital marketing completely revolutionized the way we think about measurement. We have this kind of spectrum of accuracy that we can see here, and it was the first time now that we could accurately measure the return on investment, right, from a click to an actual conversion. And part of the reason this was so revolutionary at the time is because it was a one-device world, as all of us remember. So because cookies lined up across desktop, we were able to easily match the research and discovery with that final purchase.
Which is no longer the case with the invention of mobile devices, obviously. So we talked about mobile devices created all these newer touch points. Their stats show actually over 90% of people use multiple devices sequentially to accomplish a task, right? So the funny part is because the AdWords, advertisers are so used to a very simple and clear way of measurement, so they have the same expectation for mobile, which creates really the challenge these days for us.
Exactly. I think you're spot on there. We said mobile's been fracturing the consumer journey. It's made things more difficult to measure, but part of the hard part here is the growing pain of having to rethink, okay, how do we measure things more accurately? And part of the reason it is difficult is because if we do the same comparison to what we looked at before, cookies don't line up, right, across mobile and desktop. And so it has become more difficult to match the research and discovery with that final purchase. But for everyone tuning in today and why we're all here having these discussions, although it has made things more complicated, and it's important to admit that, we do offer solutions that when pieced together can give you a holistic view of your mobile performance.
That's right.
Cool. So the two solutions we're going to get into today, cross-device conversions and attribution modeling with cross-device.
All right, let's dive in.
Okay.
So I wanted to share a personal sort of a purchase conversion path, and you see on the slide, that's my daughter. Melody is about 7 years old, and she just had her first piano recital on one of the past Sundays. So task in hand for me is to buy a recital dress for her, right? So this is actually first time experience for me, so I had no clue what kind of dress I can buy for her. During one of the breaks, what we call micro kitchen moment, and then I put on my mobile phone, I did a quick search on recital dresses, and that's when I learned that the white tulle dresses are quite popular for piano recital these days. I also found a little ad of a local shop near Mountain View.
Okay.
So next day during lunch break, I went to the shop. I reviewed all the dresses in the shop. I was just not ready to buy yet. Later that day, I log on desktop, and like every mama would do, I did a little comparison on price, right? So I log on Amazon, clicked on a couple ads, didn't buy. Eventually, I found this little e-commerce site called losautosgirls.com and made a purchase, right? So you look at the entire journey I had, really isn't a singular session that I could be converted. It's through a series of moments of a discovery and learning.
Yeah, I think it's a great example too. And so part of what we want to do is understand, okay, that is a very complex user journey, but how can we have more accurate insight to bid towards as a marketer? So with cross-device conversions, let's assume that you clicked on, a mobile ad, you didn't purchase because of timing or you were watching your daughter perform, but then later that day you went back into the direct desktop visit, right? And actually completed the purchase.
So in that case, I would be counted as a sort of organic, direct conversion.
Just direct conversion, exactly. So it's a rather uninformed viewpoint, because part of the difficulty there is if you were just looking at things from that standpoint, you would assume you just came there directly, but actually that investment that you made on that mobile touch point as a marketer is what led you to drive to the final conversion. So with cross-device conversions enabled, you're actually going to be able to see that conversion credit where it should be valued.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to highlight cross-device conversions confidence interval. I think a lot of marketers out there already know we have 95% of a confidence interval for cross-device conversions, which is the same for FDA to use for official tests. So you can see we're quite confident there.
Exactly.
The other key point you mentioned that is it's incredibly easy to include cross-device data in AdWords UI now, literally just one click to include the data you can see on the slide now.
Yep, spot on. And one thing to mention, I'll just go back one slide here. From the cross-device methodology standpoint, if anyone's curious to learn more, we do have a white paper out there that you can read about it. Just do a search for like Google cross-device methodology. You should find that through organic results. But just for a brief kind of summary, we're able to anonymously observe signed-in users across all these properties, right? Search, YouTube, Gmail, Maps, etc., and be able to understand how they're moving across devices when they're completing conversions. And as you mentioned, for those that aren't signed in, using that high statistical significance interview to extrapolate on top of that.
Absolutely. So Matt, do we have any kind of best practices to share?
Yep, there's a couple to go through. So now that we've kind of understood what cross-device conversions are, let's talk about how do we better, get them to show up in the account and allow advertisers, or consumers to complete that actual cross-device. So first one, from a design standpoint, designing both apps and sites to facilitate this cross-device behavior. Think about in your previous case, if you would have had an option to, for instance, email yourself a link to complete later. On average, a mobile touch point is about 70 seconds. So most people aren't going to want to
actually... Just over a minute.
Yeah, very short. And you think about that, right? Most people aren't going to want to actually complete that final conversion. So making it easy on your consumers to do some type of action to get them in the funnel and actually complete at a later point.
That's awesome. I know for a lot of e-commerce advertisers, this functionality is really crucial, right? To be able to save item in the shopping cart and eventually maybe move on to a different device and finish the transaction. It would have been really seamless had I had the option to purchase mouse dress on a device, right?
Yep.
Cool. So I know some cases, my agencies manage a lot of sophisticated advertisers. They oftentimes have a completely separate mobile site, not just mobile friendly, but separate mobile site.
Yeah, if you do have separate code, that's a good technical thing to point out here. And we wanted to mention, make sure that you're using the same conversion tag across both those sites. If you're using a responsive design or you have the same code overall, this shouldn't be an issue. But if you do, again, have separate sites, you need to have the same conversion code for cross-device conversions to show.
Got it. How about conversion window? How long should they set it?
Yeah, good question, and one that I've talked about with a lot of different clients. Many people just use 30 days because it's the default.
That's the default setting,
And I have some people who will ask what they're using, and they may not even be aware of what the overall conversion length is. So what I usually say is, back to your original point of mobile has fractured and fragmented the consumer journey, and the path to purchase sometimes can lengthen because of that. So it's good to consider extending this conversion window to allow more accurate and informative data to be in the account. Sometimes up to 90 days makes most sense.
Up to 90 days. That's a really good reminder. Okay, so I just walked you through the sort of my journey, right, to purchase a dress for Melody. In some of the early funnel moments, right, I was not ready to make the purchase, right? For instance, I was typing the query, what are the dresses are okay for piano recitals? So when it comes to the ads itself, is there any good recommendations on what kind of ads we should be using?
Yeah, from an AdWords strategy standpoint, I would say think about aligning the ad content as well as the overall content on your site to align with what a consumer would want to complete in that mobile session. It's a really good point that you make. You may not want to actually complete that final dress. In this case that we show on the slide, if you're selling, large luxury furniture, you're not going to want to buy a high-priced item right then on the average 70-second visit.
Right.
But if you could target them to possibly sign up for a newsletter or sign up for an email discount or download a spring catalog, it'll be more likely to bring them in that funnel and then actually get them to convert at a later point.
That's a really good point. All right, so I feel like we've discussed a little bit on the methodology of cross-device conversions. We share some best practices. Let's move on to attribution modeling.
Okay, ready for another game?
You always have a fun start.
And feel free again to play out there.
Okay.
But we're going to play a little game of rock, paper, scissors and bring it back. So overall goal here, we're going to play 3 games.
3 games?
And we're going to keep track of who won and in what order.
Okay.
Okay? So we'll
Who's
do rock, paper, scissors, and then shoot.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
All right, you got 2.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I won. I think
you
I got
won.
2 out of 3, so I won.
Yeah, close. So 2 out of 3. Traditionally, you should win, right? You should get full credit. But from a last-click methodology standpoint, if AdWords were the judge, I would actually have won that game.
That is so not fair.
Not fair for you, and I think the whole joke here is, right, you can imagine how mobile feels. And this is kind of what we're seeing more and more is that mobile's being, forgotten. It's the earlier touch points that are leading to a lot of the final conversions, but desktop's getting that full credit.
Yeah. All right, so when it comes to attribution modeling, I want to highlight one thing though. I think for a lot of marketers out there, this term isn't new, right?
Yeah.
We know for a long time Google Analytics has this feature. So what's new here?
So many of you may have played around with attribution modeling before in Google Analytics, and you've seen something like this where you compare last click versus time decay, and you may see that, originally with last click, a more direct response, bottom of the funnel brand campaign looks like it gets all the credit, and then some of that conversion credit moves towards more kind of upper funnel targeting. But now with mobile, we can actually see it from cross-device standpoint. So that's why we talk about attribution modeling and why it's so crucial for mobile success and mobile measurement, because now with cross-device and attribution modeling, we can see the previous touch points that happen a lot of the times on mobile, final conversion happening from a desktop ad click, but we can tie it back. And in this case, 2/3 of the value, if you were looking at linear, would actually be shown towards mobile, but originally you wouldn't have been able to see that. And it goes back to informed. You want to be a more informed marketer, so this is just a better, accurate reading of where value actually lies in the account.
That's super exciting. And then the ability to be able to include the cross-device data now in AdWords UI. So can you explain a little bit more on how to choose the right model in AdWords?
There's one thing to remember within that question is that anything is better than last click.
Good.
So moving away from that is kind of a step 1. In regards to how to choose a model, it does somewhat depend on your business goals. The sweet spot that we usually see is somewhere between time decay, linear, and position-based. Those 3 are highlighted there. In the order of more conservative growth strategy to a little bit more aggressive. So it kind of just depends on where your business goals lie. From my experience, I traditionally have seen position-based choose frequently, just because it's an attribution model that highlights what touch point brought the consumer into the funnel and what touch point got them to exit the funnel.
Right. So is it easy to implement in AdWords UI?
It is. Great question. Teeing me off nicely. So a couple things to note. One, it's very easy to see the data of an attribution model before you choose. So we can use the attribution modeling tool to compare how do conversion numbers change moving from last click to position base. And then when it comes to selecting a model, very simply, you're going to actually choose an attribution model per conversion type. So if you go into an actual conversion that you're tracking, you'll see in the conversion settings you can change from last click to position based as an example. and then those numbers will then change within the conversion column and more accurately reflect that value.
Wow, that sounds extremely straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, yeah.
So it sounds like for auto bidding, right, it's pretty straightforward. Once you change the attribution model, the bids will change, accordingly.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of agency or even savvy advertisers are using manual bidding. So what's your recommendation there?
Yeah, so I'd go back to looking at that attribution modeling tool. And so what you could do, for instance, is actually see when we move away from last click, in this case to something like linear, we see that this upper funnel campaign is actually 15% more valuable. The CPA is reduced by 15%. So therefore, we need to invest more accurately and increase the bids on those campaigns. Same thing for things that may be more direct response or brand terms. You may see that those look worse. It's a more accurate reading, right? So as you adjust your bids to be more effective here, you'll see an improvement in your overall conversions. That's one thing I want to point out to make sure, if you're using manual bidding and you go ahead and turn on position base and you don't change the bids, nothing's actually happened except for you're seeing a different number of the account. The actual value comes from the fact of bidding more informed and bidding to a more accurate value.
Got it. So you have to manage both the attribution model and bidding strategies
Bidding to
as
it,
well.
yep.
Okay. All right. So awesome. So do you want to do a quick summary
Yes.
on what we have covered?
Thank you, yeah. So just to kind of cover, if you came in the day and you weren't using Crossdevice at all, you would be looking at things from a mobile last click perspective. Very narrow-minded, obviously, we're aware that that's not going to be the best way to optimize. Cross-device conversions included, great next step. We're able to see how mobile ad clicks lead to desktop conversions, but still last click focus, so you're missing out on some of that overall value. Real goal here is we move down to attribution modeling with cross-device. So we're able to see how is mobile assisting desktop in the overall consumer journey, how is it leading to bottom line conversions.
Got it. Thank you for the summary, Matt.
Of course.
All right. So I do have one final question on this topic to tie everything together. What is required to set up both cross-device conversions and attribution modeling in AdWords?
Good thing to note here. So there's two specific things. One is you do need to use AdWords conversion tracking.
Okay.
If you're using Google Analytics imported goals, we're not actually able to see cross-device conversions there. Okay. Second is you do need to use conversions instead of converted clicks. So you need to move away from the converted clicks metric.
Okay, so I know this tend to be a little
big
bit
question,
confusing
right?
for a
Yeah.
lot of users out there. Can you clarify a little bit more? What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a visual here, which I think does kind of help explain it. Overall, it's more controlled. So in this case, let's say that an advertiser was wanting to track 3 different conversions that they wanted to bid towards all of these: purchase, lead, and a newsletter. If they were just using converted clicks and someone clicked on an ad and completed all 3 of those valuable actions, they would only see 1 converted click. But with conversions, you can actually see that 3 unique total conversions happen from that. And if you wanted to be aware of that as an advertiser, you'd actually be able to see that value now.
Got it. But some of the savvy advertisers out there, they want to avoid over-reporting on conversions.
Get that question a lot,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we do. So in a way, they still want to control at a certain level any kind of the number of conversions, or so-called conversion counts for any individual. Is there any way of doing that?
Yeah, so one thing to note in this example here, I'm assuming that they actually want to bid towards all 3 of those conversions they're tracking. Let's say that they only wanted to optimize towards one. You have control over what's included in the conversion column.
Right.
So they could say, hey, we only want to include purchase from a website in the conversion column, and that's all we're going to optimize for. That's great. Second biggest thing though is, and something that you want to check, you have control over your conversion count. So generally we see if you're tracking a lead form or form submission, you want to just count 1, because if someone submits 2 or 3 for some odd reason, you still only want to see 1 conversion come through. It was 1 lead. But from a sales standpoint, you'd want to track every, right? Because if I click on an ad, or back to your case, if you clicked on an ad and bought 3 dresses, that's a very valuable ad click that the advertiser should be aware of. So all in all, if you were, let's say, tracking 1 conversion, and you chose the count of 1, essentially converted clicks and conversions would be about the same.
Will be the same,
Yeah.
right. That's a really, really good point. All right, so lots of good content so far. We've covered cross-device conversions, we've covered attribution modeling in AdWords. I feel like we have come a long way, Matt.
Yeah.
So is this it? Are we now measuring mobile in its full value?
Almost, but not
Almost
it.
there.
Right? So I think it's important context to close with understanding that there is upper funnel value that if we are honestly admitting it, we're not going to be able to perfectly measure with the solutions that we've covered today. So this overall graph that we're seeing here, or a little chart, if we did everything we did today, cross-device calls, which is also important to throw in there, and attribution modeling, we'd be closing the gap more than we were before. But there's still this upper funnel piece where there's just going to be some inevitable leakage, right?
Yeah.
We can't exactly have a solution to get a number on how many conversions has happened from that.
Yeah. But I know the audience for today's session is probably a lot of data-driven people,
Yeah.
and my agency partners often do need to show data,
Yeah.
right? To talk to the advertisers, to maybe convince them on certain new concept. Is there any way to prove this?
Yep. So let me go into kind of an example of like what I would show from an upper funnel overall trends that we're seeing and how you could show actual client data as well.
Great.
So about 40%, right, of smartphone users who research on their mobile phone prefer to go on to purchase on a desktop. So that's a pretty high number.
Really
Again,
high, yeah.
just attribution and cross-device, we're probably not going to see that big of an uplift. So we know that there's more going on than we can accurately measure perfectly. But then when we look at trends overall, we see kind of what we've been talking about. Mobile traffic increasing, desktop traffic stagnant or going down a little bit. But then from a conversion rate standpoint, desktop conversion rate is looking amazing, right? Year over year it's going up. Mobile maybe is stagnant, and that's what people use to optimize towards.
Yeah.
But as we're getting at here, we know that mobile is actually being used as a research and discovery platform to drive those desktop conversions. So desktop is usually overreported, with mobile being undervalued. And if you're going to do this for your actual consumer, if we look at this slide here, there's about 4 metrics that you can use to prove this causality, this overall verdict that we're talking about. Do a year-over-year comparison, go into Google Analytics, and take a look at the increase in mobile traffic as well as mobile engagement, so things like page views, time on site, year over year. And then take a look at just the converters that are happening on desktop. And you're usually going to see that engagement, so time on site, page views, is going down before conversion, as well as there's an increase in first-time converters. So what that tells us is that, again, people that are coming to your desktop site, they're completing the conversion faster, so they're coming pre-informed from a mobile touch point that they've had.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And it's worth highlighting too, GA data, Google Analytics data, is tracking their own information
Yeah.
from their own site. All right, so any recommendations on bidding for upper funnel?
Yeah, so the advertisers that we've seen to have success here, and they've come to the point, they've done attribution modeling, they've done cross-device, and they say, hey, looking at these holistic trends or even our customized trends in the GA example, we understand that mobile is driving more value than we can see in these solutions, so we do want to bid towards that. What they'll do is they'll increase bids on mobile upper funnel, and then measure across channel, because again, we're saying there's some inevitable leakage. So
Right.
not just measuring your paid performance, but taking a look at what's the uplift across organic and direct as well. Second piece is having test parameters, so holding other advertising constant. Don't launch a YouTube campaign at the same time. We're trying to prove some causality here when you make a significant investment in mobile's upper funnel value. And third is giving it time. We've talked a lot today about fragmented consumer journey, maybe increased path to purchase. So we usually say about 3 times the average purchase length to allow yourself to get an accurate read on the overall test.
Got it. All right, so great. So we covered a ton of great content today.
Yeah.
Just to summarize, first and foremost, mobile has changed the consumer journey significantly. So the last click measurement is not going to work anymore, right? So we need to recognize first and foremost there is going to be the upper funnel leakage, regardless, right? But that's okay. Let's use all the solutions we have available, and we went over 2 really important solutions
Yeah.
today, which is the cross-device conversions and attribution modeling in AdWords UI. But let's be honest, we're not offering any silver bullet right here, right? So it's really about for you marketers to piece all information together and to offer a holistic view based on advertisers' needs.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. Trying to close the gap, right?
Yeah, trying to close the gap. Okay, so I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. I believe we have these questions coming in through this laptop.
Let's let this load.
Okay. So this is actually a familiar one. We can probably go to that one first. The question is about mobile conversion rate being low. I think you showed on one of the earlier slides as well. Yeah. So this is one of the major pushbacks oftentimes we hear from advertisers. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think it's one where you do want to take a step away of just looking at traditional in-device metrics, right? And that's kind of why I talk about maybe looking at things more holistically. How's your overall, paid performance uplift across device? So you can assume some of that leakage is happening. But if you're just optimizing towards in-device mobile conversion rate, specifically if you're doing last click, you're not going to be bidding very effectively. So, doing cross-device and doing attribution is extremely helpful to improve that conversion rate overall, as well as mobile site design. That's a separate topic.
Yeah.
But that being said, it can be helpful to take a step back and look at your account performance overall across devices and not just get stuck on in-device conversion rates.
Got it. All right, so I think there's another one coming up. Sounds like, so this is about probably the attribution modeling, right? The second question. So it sounds like you are recommending AdWords tracking versus GA tracking, which is Google Analytics.
So it's not a recommendation, it's just a requirement to get cross-device conversion. So basically, from a Google Analytics standpoint, it's still a great tool. Fantastically helpful for insights. Continue to use that, continue to use your goals. But if you're not using AdWords conversion tracking, I would set that up as well. They both can be used together. So the AdWords conversion tracking can be used within your paid AdWords account so that you can see those conversions as well as cross-device conversions. But then Google Analytics, still helpful to analyze things like behavior flow reports, looking at organic, direct, all that great insight is still extremely helpful, but it's not one or the other, it's that you should be doing both to get cross-device conversions.
Yeah, and then it's a really good point you're bringing up, and it doesn't really affect the page load time that much
No.
to implement both. Okay, so the next one is more about cross-device integration. So the question is, can you share more information on cross-device integration with third-party platforms? So I would imagine this is asking about Kenshu and Adobe,
like third-party bidding and third-party
bidding
tracking.
platforms.
So I'll kind of answer two, and again, I'm not a third-party expert by any means, but from what we've traditionally seen, let's say that you're just using the third-party bidding, but you're using the AdWords conversion column as the source of truth, so it's tying in the API and using that actual number to bid towards. Doing things like cross-device and attribution modeling will actually have an effect. That's great, because it's improving that number, making it more accurate in the AdWords conversion column, right? But I think some of the issue people can run into is if they're using third-party tracking or third-party overall measurement solutions. So what I've seen is that people will actually still set up the AdWords conversion tracking tag to get cross-device conversions. Then they can look at the overall uplift that they see from that, as well as attribution models within the account, and then apply that increase or discount in the actual third-party bidding. So they can change the actual either target or the percentage that they're bidding towards on mobile based off of the fact that maybe they see a X percentage uplift in conversions that they weren't seeing before.
Got it. So that's interesting. So our team is actually testing. We're under the second scenario,
Okay.
where you're right. You can still manually download the cross-device data from AdWords and import it into any platform, third-party platform you're using, and optimize your bidding strategies accordingly.
Yep.
So that's interesting point.
So you've got one more, a site question.
This is about mobile site.
Cool. So
why should I have a mobile site?
Yeah, big question. But overall, having a mobile site is crucial. We can, there's lots of stats. Just go ahead and you can look at thinkwithgoogle.com. It has some really interesting user studies on overall speed and design expectations that users have on mobile. So a big one is, 70-second is a quick visit. So you want to have the best design possible, and speed matters a lot, because if we can't get the information that we want within that overall context, we're probably going to leave and not come back to that brand. But overall, it's just really important. The last thing you want is to pull up your phone, see a desktop site, and pinch to zoom. And we have less loyalty when it comes to brand these days as well. So if we have a bad experience in interacting with a pinch to zoom desktop site on our mobile phone, we're less likely to go back to that service later on. So it is a really crucial piece within the overall mobile success.
Absolutely. And I think we mentioned about how some of the advertisers are using a separate site or maybe a kind of a different type of mobile site. I think it really doesn't matter that much so long as it's a mobile-friendly site.
Exactly.
Right?
So you don't need to have a separate mobile site, responsive, adaptive, whatever it may be, totally fine as long as it's a mobile-friendly experience.
Okay. So questions are flying in. What mobile bid adjustment should I apply?
Great question.
Yeah.
So two things here. One is if you're not bidding to at least the relative value, so taking a look at, right now mobile's bid is a percentage of the desktop bid.
Yep.
And so overall, making sure that you look at, okay, what's the conversion rate on desktop versus the conversion rate on mobile, and adjust the bid in relation to that. And then as you start to increase the conversion number on mobile through cross-device conversions and attribution modeling, make sure to continually adjust that, because you're going to see those conversions go up and up and up.
Yeah.
If the question is more around the term of what to invest on the upper funnel piece, then I would say usually like if you're going to do a test, make it significant. So 40, 50% increase if you want to see that overall causality. But that's kind of like a later point after you've done the cross-device and attribution.
Yeah, I think one of the common kind of equation we're being using is what we call RCVR, right? Mobile bit recommendation, which is mobile conversion rate divided by desktop minus 1. I believe a lot of bidding platforms are using the same equation
probably.
as well.
Yeah. I think we got the last one here. Cool.
So what is different about a mobile strategy?
So it's kind of a general question. I'll try my best to answer it and be helpful.
Yeah, this is a very broad question.
I think the biggest thing is, we use this term micro moments all the time, but our expectations and our experience and what we want to complete on a mobile device is completely different than desktop. So you want to be offering us information very quickly. We're looking to do a lot of research and discovery. We want to have quick speed on the site as well as good design on the overall site. And think about interesting ways as well that you could possibly target users differently, going back to kind of the newsletter sign up or the spring catalog. Someone may not always want to complete a final conversion. So how can you target the types of searches they may be making in the kind of upper funnel? We call it like see, think. You're more questioning about funnel. The overall service and product, but you're not in the like buy, do now phase. So one, how could you target those users better? And how could you adopt different content on your site, more concise, so that they digest this information, they trust you as a brand, they have a good experience learning about the products and service that you offer to then possibly complete later. Still have it easy to complete a buy process, right? People still do final conversions. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but it tends to be more around the upper funnel research and discovery, so allow users to have a good experience there.
Yeah, and this is why we have today's Hangout, right? Which is measurement is such a key piece when it comes to mobile strategy. You have to have this right mindset, right framework in place for mobile.
Exactly, yep.
All right.
Cool.
So I think that is all the questions we have.
Perfect.
Audience, feel free to add any questions to our, to our Hangout recording. We'll do our very best to address them as well.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's a lot of good content. Thank you so much for your insight. And audience, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys joining us today and look forward to see you again on our next Hangout.